Okay, guys, welcome back to the Christians Talking Business podcast. My name is Kurt Storing. I am here today with Hunter Sprague, not Sprague, almost got that wrong. Hunter Sprague with Monolith Movement. Guys, this episode is brought to you by Proclaim Podcasting. If you are a Christian, coach, or entrepreneur and you podcast and you love to just hit record and have someone else do the rest, go to proclaimpodcasting.com, sign up for a free consultation. Hunter, my man, I'm excited to have you on because, like I said, we've been in the same orbit for a while now, but never actually connected. So please, would you give us like the 30-second, who are you and what do you do? And then we can dive in from there.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, it's an honor. An honor. Yeah. But yeah, my name's Hunter Sprague. So I run a men's coaching program for Christian men. So it's called Monolith Movement. And so I've been doing that full time just since October of 2023. Did it for about a year while I was in full-time ministry. So that was the majority of my adult life was full-time ministry, doing all sorts of stuff. So um but yeah, I mean, the overarching kinda goal is to increase, this amount of embodiment and truly living out being the Imago Dei and being congruent with what we believe, and so kind of fighting against this strictly mental faith and one that actually is lived out in other areas of life, not just mentally, but also physically, and we're just trying to get guys in the church healthy and vibrant and just get that fire back and fight against a lot of the apathy that we see. So, yeah.
Man, I resonate so strongly with that. That's been a real big focus for me is how do I clear the 12 inches between sort of head and heart? And then the heart sort of encompassing the entire body. Because, as far as I know, I'm not a theologian, but the body is important. We were put here with bodies. The
Yep.
angels were not. And so what does that mean? So there's
Yep.
something in there that I think, theologically or even just very practically, we should probably get into at some point.
Yep.
And I love that because, yeah, it's not what you see in today's church. Is this your first business? Full-time ministry for your whole adult life, and then
Uh,
you're just like, "I think I'll start a business." Or what is that like?
I would say at this scale, 100%. So, like, I got, my brother-in-law, Keith, he got me into design, like, when I was probably, like, 15 or 16, right? So I was kind of, like, in the creative space, that kinda moved into photography, so I was kinda making a run at that, but I would say, I mean, dude, I had no idea what I was doing. Like, the work was there, like, I believed in what I was doing, I thought could do it, but I had no idea of, like, getting clients or building a business. I was just kind of, like, hoping people found me, and um so it kinda went from, like, design to photography to filmmaking. But man, yeah, from, like, the age of, gosh, probably 18 to 30, 31, yeah, it was just kinda working for other people and contracting through those kinda means, and so, yeah, this was the one that was like, "Man, okay, I really wanna make a run at this," for whatever reason. So it's yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the mindset shift there then, because it sounds like you had this inkling. You're
Yep,
creative, you gotta build things, you gotta
yep,
do your own thing, but it wasn't well fleshed out in a way that you could actually or that you even knew that you could have this as a
right.
career or whatever you wanna call it. What was the mental change from that to being like, "Oh, I'm just gonna start this coaching business"?
Yeah, yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, I think it was funny because I was kind of going through, I mean, over the last few years, going through this kind of, as a lot of people in ministry do, where it's just like, man, am I so called to this? Like, is this my assignment? Is this really what I want to be doing? And it's not the question of like, am I going to serve the church? Like, that's just like there. Doesn't matter like what, you're doing for money. Like, you're going to be doing that. It's like, I kind of had to get that into my head of like, I'm not failing if I leave ministry. Um, but it really was just that kind of subtle shift of understanding how the calling could be lived out in a lot of different areas and ideally I'm the same person no matter what the industry that I'm in is. And so, man, I went through a lot of that. Like, I was going through just that tension and feeling those things, and I've always been, I mean, I'm an artist, but like the specifically like the marketing aspects of like, man, actually using art to like get to an end goal. I was, a lot of my work in ministry was like documentary, like storytelling and stuff like that. So like the idea of story and narrative and those things that's just like who I am. That's come very naturally, and I've been trained by really incredible people to do that better. And so, um, yeah, really over time, it was just this tension of like, am I worth anything like in the market? And it was funny because I went and I kind of went out and I kind of started like, hey, do you have any openings out here? Like, is there a job out here? And I mean, I talked to one of my buddies that, I mean, he runs a billion-dollar company, and I was about to go work for him in marketing, and I brought that up to him. I was just like, man, I just I guess as like this limiting belief, is, man, I've spent all this time in ministry. Am I worth anything? And his response was like, I think it means you are worth more, because you have to have this heart. You have to have this like pastoral, like, ability to counsel people and love people and treat people well. And that is inherently the job in ministry, no matter what you're doing. It's caring for people, even if you're like a guy that runs front of house or a designer or whatever, like you're caring for people. Like at the end of the day, that's what ministry is. And so that was a really big shift for me. And it was funny because I was kind of going through this process of looking out and like, man, yeah, do I want to go into marketing? Do I want to go into sales? Like, I just love people. I love talking to people. It's like, those are the things that would make sense. Right. And it was like the Lord just he would kind of give me this taste of like, hey, here's a thing, here's an offer, here's something that could happen, but not yet. Like, just wait. And it kind of like that kept happening. And it was really strange because I would get this thing, I'll get this offer, this opportunity, and I'll be like, "This is awesome," and that makes me, feel very blessed and like taken care of and provided for sure. But it was like the Lord was just always like, "Man, just not yet." And so, at a certain point, I was just like, "Man, I'm just gonna start this page." Like I've been wanting to do this fitness thing. I've been, this is a huge felt need in the church. Um, we just need to have the conversation. So that's kind of how this started. Is I was just like, man, I'm just going to start this page. I have no idea what I'm going to do for it, but I have some designs. I have some things I want to say. I need an outlet. Like I just need somewhere where I can just say what I really want to say. And so that's what I did. And there was no plan originally of, any specific of like what I was going to monetize. And so I went through all of this stuff of like, man, is this going to be ebooks? Is this going to be like, podcasting and doing YouTube? Is it going to be like an apparel line? Like, I love merch and apparel and fashion, all that kind of stuff. And so there's all these ideas. And I met this guy who we know, Brandon Forbes, and met him. And he's like, dude, I think coaching is the thing. I think it's going to be the highest leverage thing. And at the time, man, that was even a hard mental shift for me. I was like, dude, I can't literally do that. Like, I know enough, but man, I don't know. Like, really, me? And and he just encouraged me a ton. And so I just jumped out and I just kind of threw it out. And I had, a handful of guys jump in. And it was really cool to see it go from like everything being in theory, like, man, if I was going to sit with somebody and be like, this is what to do to get into shape, to fix your mindset, that was just in theory. That was like, I think this is what's worked for me. And I think this is what would work for others. And so then to see that like in reality and in practice and see these guys like actually do the work and see results, I was like, "Oh, okay. Like, yeah, yeah, this can happen." So it was kind of just this bug, man, and you just get super excited about seeing people win. And it's really cool to see like your thing is helping them. Like that's like the tool, because a lot of these guys, they've done everything, they've tried everything, they've been everywhere, and it just hasn't worked. And so um it's been this really slow but steady process, where I'm kind of always falling back into this like limiting belief or like kind of imposter syndrome. And then it's just like, man, I get that text, it's just like, bro, this has been, so good. So, um, it's a daily, I mean, it's just so mental, man. It's all mental, just to kind of keep yourself in the right frame. And, so, uh, yeah, that's kind of been the journey. Yeah.
Beautiful. Man, thank you for that. That's so interesting because there's a number of similarities I hear in that with other people I've talked to with a
Yeah.
similar path. And what I really like to touch on first, because I've got, specifics around Instagram page by the sounds of it, one product. Let's talk about that in a minute.
Yep.
But there's something, for me at least, not being wired like this or not being patient and obedient enough, the build up before the jump. Like that feels to me more rewarding in a sense
Mm.
because you're not grasping, you're not coveting that instant win. And I wonder if that was something conscious or if it was just sort of like, it's not the perfect opportunity. I do really want to do it, but it's not right. So maybe just talk us through that because, man, I have been guilty over the last 2, 3 years of being like, well, I'm just going to force my will. I'm going to create whatever out of nothing. And then if it doesn't work, oh, I guess I'm a failure. And it was just this horrible cycle. So talk to me a little bit about that mindset thing before we get into the specifics of the business itself.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's funny you say that because looking back, I think I was kind of on the opposite end of the spectrum. I was just like very, like, maybe like too patient, I would say. Too patient, like too scarce, just like, man, I really gotta like dot the I's and cross the T's and make sure, and there's so many months where it was just like, is this a month? Like, is this the month I can jump, and I can hand in that resignation, and it was so funny, man, because I felt myself like I kept moving the goalposts, because originally it was just like, oh, I'll just match my salary and then that, and I'll do that for a couple months and that'll be good. And then I was like, no, let's double it. Let's double the salary. And then I was like, but what if what if that? And so honestly, it was that thing, my wife was like so encouraging, but in a really funny, like strict way of just like, what are you so afraid of? Like, what are you so worried about? And it was funny because I was, um, that became mentally this thing of like incongruence in me, because I'm telling these guys that I'm coaching, like, dude, just like take risks, like have the fire, like get out there and do something. And then I'm just like, not, I'm playing it as safe as I possibly could. And so it became really, really convicting. And so, for me, I was like, man, if nothing else, like I'm gonna do this and kind of blaze this trail in a way, if it, just to be like a case study for the guys that are, that I'm coaching, that like, hey, this is what this could possibly look like. And so it was definitely risky, I mean, business inherently is, but I had to get over that hump. And again, a lot of that was just like like, will this actually work? Yeah, it's working now, but does it work in 6 months? Like, um, and man, just had to get the right people, the right voices around me, just to be like, okay, I want to make sure I'm not crazy, and like other people that are wise, that have some years on me, they see it, they see the potential, they see the value, and they're affirming that in me. And like, that's the voice that ultimately I'm listening to, rather than, nobody somebody that's like never done this kind of thing, it's like that was really, really critical just to have the right voices like speaking in, and encouraging me, just to be like, man, this is something, like you could do it. And at the end of the day, like you're going to be taken care of, and so I think I think the Lord used a lot of that just to hit against, yeah, I mean, just like the scarcity, and just like like I have to be in control, I have to be super safe, I have to be super secure. And him just being like, hey, no matter what, like you're fine. Like you will figure it out and it'll be okay. So like just move. Like just make a decision, And that has been like the most rewarding thing. And looking back, that's always been like the really incredible points, in my life, have been the times where it's just like, dude, I'm throwing caution to the wind. I have enough data, I have enough information, I have enough like words, And so just do something, just move. And man, every time, like the Lord has just come through in a huge way.
Man, I believe that indecision is one of the killers of men, and I have
Yes.
experienced this myself. And what
Yep.
you're saying in terms of like make a call, um, there has been a scripture that's been in my mind a lot, and I've already talked about that a number of times on the first few episodes of this podcast. But it's Proverbs 3, 5, and 6, and I was really struck on like lean not on your own understanding, and I was like, okay, I get it. It's not up to me, but I sort of missed the rest of that. But the part that I want to touch on right here is that, and he will make your path straight.
Mm.
In prayer about 2 months ago, prayer talking to some mentors. Sounds like you also have some mentors who have been there before. I just got this sense of like, oh, I've got to be on the path for him to make my path straight. Like he
Yeah.
doesn't say he'll pick your path and
Yep.
then gently put it on and then make everything okay. Like, no, he'll make your path straight. So I think that's a huge lesson. Even for me as like an action bias go-getter, I
Hmm.
still fall into this. And I have to realize that, man, it's such a sucker of my soul not to decide. So
Hmm.
that's a great word. by the sounds of it, because yeah, we come at different angles, it sounds like,
Mhm.
but ultimately have faced similar struggles with,
Yes.
is it gonna be enough? Is it gonna work? Is it this time? But man, what is it about this, like, is it gonna work 6 months from now? Because that was one of my hugest things when I was doing dad
Mhm.
work. It's like, it's working now, it worked 6 months ago, but I don't know, man, what could change? And I was even talking to my wife yesterday reviewing finances, I'm like, "Oh, we're just sort of making this new business work. Oh, it's so scary." But I'm like, "Wait, we've had this, business savings plan just in case everything goes wrong, emergency fund, personal emergency fund, and then I've got, like, way too much in taxes just in case, but I still feel like I'm nowhere near where I need to be." And it was like this smack upside my head, like, "Why are you so fearful?" So I do you have any thoughts on
Yep.
that? Because it's so weird being in, maybe it's an online thing because things change so fast, I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know, man. Things definitely change fast, and but I think I don't know. I think for me, it was just like it was kind of like the lack of data, over the past of like, yeah, but what does this look like in this particular season, or is this time of year going to be really good, and then this one, I didn't have a lot of that, so that a lot of that was kind of just having faith, of like, man, it's going to be all right ultimately, but um yeah, that was a big hump to get over for sure. But I think for you and for me, I mean, I think I fell back a lot of like, I think that can be this kind of like check engine light in a way of like, man, how tightly are you holding this specific thing, right? Like, and just seeing this as like, man, this is the current vehicle. It might always not always. I mean, probably not. It would probably, and this with dad work, like it might not always be the vehicle, and you have to be okay with that. But ultimately, it's trusting, like, Lord, you've brought me on a particular path. Like you've built these skills into me, whether it's sales or marketing or storytelling or these like, specific things within, creative things or whatever it is, right? You've built those things into me and those things are extremely valuable. And so it's like, man, this is the vehicle now, but I have to that the tighter I hold on to it, the more stressed I'll be, the more anxious I'll be, rather than just like, hey, and
Yes.
one of my mentors said to me like a couple months ago, he's like, "You need to realize that Monolith is not yours. It was never yours. It's been gifted, it's been handed to you for a time, but it can be taken just as quickly, And so and that kind of stings, right? That stings a little bit at the beginning because you have this like kind of, dude, I built this, like I worked so hard. It's so cool. I'm so proud of it. And that's valid for sure. But at the same time, it's like, hey, ultimately, like this isn't yours, and the tighter you grip, the worse you will feel. The more stressed
Right.
you'll be, and so that's been a process for me. Is just like kind of being that open handedness of just like, man, this is the thing right now. I'm grateful for it. It might not be the thing in a year. I'm going to work very hard to make sure that it is the thing in a year, but ultimately, again, dude, I'm gonna be taken care of. And it's funny, I'm sure we would talk about this at some point, but I'm in this like this kingdom economic coalition thing. I just joined, in my town here, and we were talking about the parable of the talents, and there was something that, and we were just kind of spitballing and just talking about it, and it was really interesting because it kind of drove home the point of like, dude, risk is everything. Like just taking risks and having that level of trust. And like, who was the guy that was reprimanded? It was the guy that was scared and scarce and didn't do anything, and that scarcity in that story, like I would say, it created this like scrupulosity like towards his master, and I've seen that a lot. And I think that's where a lot of Christians, that maybe want to be business owners or want to be entrepreneurs, like that's where they get, right? Because they're sitting here and all of their thoughts are, what if this becomes an idol? What if this dominates me? What if it's just like all these what ifs, right? And again, those things are valid, right? But it kind of it shifts all of that ownership onto onto yourself and your ability to stay holy and to stay, sanctify yourself essentially, which is really funny to see. It's like, dude, I don't think we have that in us, man. I don't we don't seem very good at that. But just that thing of like, man, risk is it's a blessing to be able to do it, and I believe it gets blessed because it shows a heart that's just like, man, I'm open-handed. I'm gonna trust you, Lord, and I can just go and do and just move and just make those decisions, just like we were talking about. I can just make the decisions and trust ultimately that myself and my family will be taken care of. And so again, like that 6 months out thing, that year out thing, it's like, you know, it's like over and over in scripture, it's like, don't worry about tomorrow. Like it's not promised, and we're like, not only am I gonna worry about tomorrow, I'm gonna worry about, you know, Q4. I'm gonna
Yeah.
worry about 2025. I'm gonna worry about 2030, and it's just like, dude, you, I get it. We're trying to be wise, but it can be twisted so easily to where, again, it's just like, man, we're just trying to just stay in such tight control, and it just leads to destruction, so it's a hard balance, it's a hard tension for sure.
Yeah. And what you're saying is really just faith. I mean,
Yep.
I don't have to have faith when I know every single X and O and,
Exactly.
strategy. And that's a ditch that I have really been, humbled in over the last, my entire adult life. And it's like part of the flip side to this is all the what ifs. Um, yes, the blessing comes from the action and the risk. And yes, the good outcomes come. But I think that perhaps something less talked about is it's when you're moving and operating on faith that God can also humble you, or that you can also be humbled, in front of God, or humble yourself before the hand of God, that He can teach you things, that He
Yep.
can reprimand you as a father reprimands a son, but you have to be
Yep.
moving. You
Yep.
have to be like, okay, I think this is right, God. I've got faith here. And He might say, yeah, great. That faith is actually a little bit off here because there's still some stuff in your heart that I'm going to
Hmm.
work through, and it's for your good. And
Yep.
so the action is not just, hey guys, take action, you're going to have a successful business. Maybe that's not what God has for you, but take
Hmm.
action so that you'll know that. And it's like, dude,
Yes.
that is so maybe not talked about in Western Christendom because we're all about like good vibes only, right? And so I just wanted to share my experience of that
Oh yeah.
with jumping with dad work even. I jumped off of it and it was like that didn't make any sense. That was through faith. And the resulting landing was one of brutal pain, like
Mm.
really brutal pain. And so anyway, it's been on this side of it. I see God's grace, mercy, and love. But the initial thought was, what have I done? Like,
Yeah.
God, where are you, man? And that was so necessary to get to where I am now, which again, I'm not perfect. I'm not even, whatever. I don't have great results in any part, maybe compared to other people, but I feel a huge peace, like a
Yep.
huge peace from having been obedient to that. So
Yep.
anyway, if that resonates with you,
Yes.
amazing.
100%.
Take it and hopefully use that in your life if you're listening. Let's start talking about this page. I started an Instagram page for the same reason. I was like, I really need to share this stuff that changed my life. Wonder if anyone cares. Was it Instagram for you? And has that been your only sort of platform so far?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So that was the one that made the most sense. I mean, it was what I was, already using the most, and so I was like, man, that's kind of where all of my potential audience would probably be. So, and I think, a lot of this, what was really helpful was just like getting the right voices, right? Because, it was really helpful just to have guys be like, dude, just focus on one thing, just like simplify, focus on one platform, one funnel for now. And so that was super helpful, just to get going. Yeah,
Eh,
just Instagram. And so, I'm thinking through some other things at this point, for sure. Kind of more based on like what I'm specifically doing and wanting to be. There might be some kind of supplementary things as well, but um, just Instagram for now. Don't even have a website,
And
so
dude, there's so much time wasted with stuff that doesn't matter. So if it's working,
yes,
then like, dude, that's amazing. Do you just have the one product, which is to say, like, hey, I've got a coaching offer, take it or leave it? Has that always been the thing you've had? Talk me through the progression of your product that you
yeah.
sell.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I mean, it's essentially been the same thing. It's just been, refined and made better over time. So my initial product, I mean, I came up with the name Muscle Discipleship. Like that was like the course. I was like, that's sticky. It's I like it. Like I want, we're focused on building muscle. Like that's maybe the thing, but I also like want every piece of Monolith to be a discipleship model where we're bringing guys together that have things to say to others and wisdom to share, and so that just kind of felt right. But what was funny is like originally the thing was like, man, I just want to get Christian guys like into bodybuilding. Like that was like the avenue because it felt like, aesthetics and like that kind of fitness was almost like taboo to a lot of people. Like you would see a lot of people, be like, oh, no, well, it's not functional. So that can't be okay, or what, just all these like crazy things like that. Um, you can't want to look good, and I'm like, yeah, you should look good for your wife, dude. Like, why not? I don't understand. Like, what's the holdup? And so it was kind of like wanting to introduce guys into that world a little bit. And again, just do something that's like a little bit, maybe not as mainstream. Most of the Christians I knew, they were more into like say CrossFit or like running or things like that, right? So um it's a little bit different. So yeah, at first it was kind of like, man, I want to get guys into bodybuilding. So like let's get them on that kind of a diet, let's get them on that kind of lifting routine. Like let's, kind of know the ins and outs. And so it was very just like one-on-one, I would like make this huge PDF for each guy and have all the ins and outs. And over time it just became really clear like there were a lot of other pieces that were needed, and so you started to see like, man, a lot of these guys are just really lonely. Like, they're in a good church, right? But they're, this kind of mindset is really lacking, and they're like their context like right around them, right? So they'll have good Christian guys around them, but they talk about the NFL and like that's it. So if you're a guy that's coming up and you're just like, dude, I want to like get in crazy good shape. I want to like, you know, reform how I'm living. I want to go build a business and build wealth. It's like a lot of these guys are just like, they got nothing for you. And so realize like community was going to be a huge piece of this, just to be around like-minded people that are doing the work alongside you. And they're just normal guys like you. I mean, there's a lot of power in that. Um, and then, just getting better tools, so introduce like an app, almost a year ago. And then but also realizing like, man, like a lot of the guys that jump in, like they're not just wanting help with, their physique or like losing weight or bulking up or, learning how to eat better. There's a lot of mindset stuff going on. So a lot of these guys are coming in with like, man, dude, anxiety is crushing me in this season. Depression is crushing me. Like I'm so burnt out, I'm whatever. And so that became this huge need of like, man, this is where these guys are at. I want to meet them there. I want to provide something for them. And so it's been the same offer, the same product, but it's just, slowly adding a lot of layers, And so at this point, like it feels, I would say, it's funny because I'm still adding stuff to it. So I'm like, man, you know, 85, 90%, where we'll be at 100 like in a month or two, of like, this is it. Like, this is the fulfillment. I have all the data. I know what people need. I know how to get that across. Like, this is like the finished product, right? Um, and so from there, yeah, it's gonna be I'll be shifting a little bit. And so it'll be the same product and offer, but just with like different levels of intimacy, I would say, and so we're working on because a lot of the guys that I talk to are in ministry. They're single income earners, they're, not in a crazy job, and so like my main offer is pretty out of reach for a lot of those guys. And so for me, it's been this tension because I have all these, people just like, oh, well, just like don't even care about them. Like don't even just, and I'm like, I get that 100%. Um, but at the same time, like that's my heart is for that guy that's like just really struggling in a lot of areas of life and he just needs help, So it might not be the full, like big, like, high ticket offer kind of thing, but it's like, man, I can put the tools and the resources and the frameworks in front of him and encourage him to just do the work. And so that's kind of what we're working on now. It's kind of a lower, monthly membership kind of a thing, community, that kind of stuff. And then I think that'll be a really nice, like, kind of split between one-on-one, because then it's like I'm not starting every month at zero. I'm like, hey, I got to go make like X amount of sales. It's like, dude, I can be very selective on who is coming in, who, and essentially it's like, man, who do I want to be able to text me at 11 p.m. at night and be like, yeah, dude, like let's freaking talk, because I really care about you and I really love you and I really, really like you. I like to talk to you. So that's kind of where we're going. And so yeah, it's been trial and error. It's been, man, let's just focus on one thing. Let's just make it better and refine it and add to it, take away from it as we go, over and over and over, and and just end up with something that I'm extremely excited about and believe in and all those sorts of things. Yeah.
Nice. Okay, so it's still one-on-one-ish, but there's a group element to it with the
Yep.
community? Is that how
Yep.
it is right now? Okay. Yeah,
Yes.
that
Yeah.
makes
For
a
sure.
ton of sense, man.
Yep.
What's the, and I know this is, like, super insider baseball because I'm super interested in how other coaches do it. We had, like first of all, it was a year-long program, and then it was
Yep.
a 16-week program, and it was, marginally high tech. It was, like, 4 or 5 grand. And we had an app that went along with, like, habit stacks. We had accountability with that. We had a Slack group for check-ins and accountabilities. We had 2 weekly group coaching calls. We had skills training videos. And then we had what I call the leadership and legacy framework, which is like how to actually build your vision as a man and husband and father. So anyway, that's like what my
Mm,
program was like. And we walked
yep.
guys through that over the course of those 16-ish weeks. And at the end of it, they were more confident in their leadership as a man, husband, and father so that they could have more intimacy and all this kind of stuff. So with that as the sort of background, if you're willing to share, I'm super curious what yours looks like in terms of like what are you offering? What are the touch points? How long is it? Maybe even what you're charging. Like you can share as much or as little as you want, but I'm super interested in the inside baseball because when I got into this, I was just like frantically searching for the programs I was in to
Yeah.
kind of replicate those. I
Yep.
didn't know what other people were doing.
For sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's been that's kind of been some of the processes, kind of like getting out of the mindset of just like a fitness coach, right? So in the past, it's been just like, man, just like come in, like pay month to month. Like I think you'll need 6 months. I think you'll need 9 months. I think you'll need 12 months, right? Um, and so, I had a lot of guys at like 250, 300, 350 a month, kind of a deal. And so over time moved to more of that like package kind of pricing where it'd be like, man, it's 3 grand, for 6 months, right? For instance. And so and what I was offering was like very one-on-one, like, our onboarding is like, what's your gym? What are your goals? Like, what equipment do you have at your gym? Like, are we working around any injuries? Is there any specific, like, I want to have like bigger pecs. I've never been able to build my pec. It's just that kind of thing. Cool. Like, let's kind of program around that. Um, Same with diet, figuring out just the ins and outs of what everybody's going to need. Habit stack, all that kind of stuff, right? Offering the community, group calls, you have access to me, all that kind of stuff. So, um, that is shifting a little bit, right? I'm kind of in that space of like, do I want it to be just 16 weeks or do I want it to be 6 months? And that's just the thing. And then after that, because I've had a lot of guys come in that say need to lose 100 pounds. So that's not a 16-week thing. That's not a 6 month thing. That's a 12-month thing. Like, and hopefully, like that's like a sprint, dude. Like that's like 2 pounds a week lost, and which is doable. I've had guys do it, but it's hard. Like there's not really much margin for error at all within that. And so, for me, kind of shifting to more of that, like, man, this is the framework. And it's similar to you. It's just like these are the things that you have to get ingrained into your life, right? Like we're focusing for sure on whatever goal, whether it's losing 50 pounds or gaining 40, like that's what we're shooting for. But more importantly than that, like you need to be building a love of the gym and of sleeping enough and eating well and getting sun and moving your body and like leading your wife in that, leading your kids in that, um, having the tools like just to process things mentally, for instance, or whatever it is, So, so that's kind of like the work I'm doing right now is basically just to make the 2.0 version. So what that will be, of muscle discipleship is, um, it's honestly probably going to be going more. We're doing this like summer shred thing right now, which was like a wild hair. I had, it was like a Thursday and I launched it on Saturday, kind of a thing. And because I was like, we need to start on April 1st. Like that's like, a good 90-day run. And But dude, it's been so much fun. It's been so much fun, and the things we've been doing differently with this, that, again, I got out of another, like, coaching, program that I was in 2 times, with some of my buddies, but, 90-day sprint, specific goals, and you're kind of posting your score sheet, like your scorecard, your daily habits in front of everybody. And I'm calling you out if you don't, so it's like, hey, I'm missing check-ins from XXXXX. And so there's a lot of buy-in, a lot of accountability. But the thing we've been doing is like we haven't been doing individualized programming. It's like, dude, we're all doing the same split. So we all know what we're talking about when we say, dude, that, chest bicep day was brutal, like, or, doing these abs, that was hell, so it's it's given me a lot to think about, because I think there is something really interesting about like being, I mean, essentially doing the same thing as all of your guys that are, we're all in this together, like we're doing the same things, we're all kind of held to the same standard at the same time. You're putting your work in front of them, not just me, but 40 other guys. And man, that gives you a lot of ownership, and there's a lot of inherent camaraderie and competition. And so for me, that's been this like, man, I really like some of those elements, and I think that'll be really cool to have. And so essentially what I'm, the new offer will be just hours of training, it's like deep dives into everything from lifting to nutrition to testosterone to mindset, rule of life, spiritual disciplines. I've been able to have some incredible conversations with leaders, in the church, outside the church. Like that's like really great content that can go in there. That's just super encouraging. Um, the app. So like, workouts, the lifting, the daily habits, the things. And so, community, like essentially I'm just trying to build something where it's like, man, there's really not much else that you would need, and I think that's the inherent problem I see like in fitness, right? Is a lot of guys, they know they need to get in shape, right? So, but what do? Like they think that just going to the gym is going to fix them. So they get on an app and that gives them workout plans, and that part's great, right? They get really good at that, but they don't change their diet, they don't change their lifestyle, they don't change their habits, and whatever mental block they're feeling, yeah, I mean that'll for sure help, right? But it's not going to be everything. Or, they'll be like, I'm just going to get on keto and lose some weight. And so they do that for like 3 months, and then they lose some weight, and then they just stop and they go back to whatever they were doing. So it's like those things are great in themselves, but like the overall puzzle is way bigger. Most of the time you're not lifting or eating. So like, what are you doing that would potentially point you to more progress? And so just having this mindset of like, man, it's just all inputs and outputs, and like, are the things you're doing every day, like, is that it's just small shifts, man. It's not like crazy stuff, but it's just like, hey, you're already doing this. Let's just do this a little bit better. You're already doing that, but let's just do that a little bit better. And over time, with enough discipline, with enough consistency, it's like, dude, results will happen. It's inevitable, But it's just most guys, like they really just need the box to exist in, and that's why they haven't moved, because they, it's like, oh, I'm gonna get in shape, so I'm gonna go follow some fitness influencers, and this set of guys is saying to like always do this thing if you want to make progress, and this other set of guys like never do that if you want to make progress, and it's just like it's not a lack of information, it's like way too much, and and those things always feel like they're competing, because you're like, well, could I like bodybuilding style lifting, but can I do that with this kind of diet or whatever, it's just it can be very confusing. And so for me, it's just kind of like, man, I'm just going to give you a lifestyle to exist in where every question is answered, all the relevant information. And I will give you all of the information, but I'll even grade it on like, this is a heavy hitter and a big lever to pull, or this is like, if you want to do it, great, but don't expect like big outcomes if you do. And so just understanding like, man, there are layers, there are big levers to pull, and there are a lot of things that a lot of guys waste a lot of time with. And so, um, I want to get you really incredible results, but also want to equip you with like, man, this is just what you do now from here on out. This isn't just like a little thing that you did for 16 weeks or for 90 days or for 6 months, but this is like, like I tell guys all the time, like, man, the biggest win for me is like, I see you on Instagram and you're on vacation in Florida, and the first thing you do is go and find a gym, because you're like, man, if this is going to be a good vacation, I need to still be hitting the weights, and you're excited about it. And you're like, man, I'm not just going to stop. I love this. Like, this is how I rest now. This is how I live now. And so those kinds of things, man, just building those habits, that lifestyle stack, that like rule of life, like that piece is really what I want to get across in my program.
Man, that is so interesting that if you're genuinely and deeply helping people, it almost always comes back to a way, way deeper thing that you have to end up touching on. Because
Yeah.
you could start this and go like, dude, I just want to be a fitness coach. And you're like,
Mm.
why aren't you doing what I'm telling you?
Yeah.
And then you suddenly realize that they've been believing a whole bunch of lies. Maybe the relationship with God isn't where it needs to be. And it's
Yep.
like, okay, so here's the program. And actually, we're going to be spending all this other time on, like you said, how to even live life. And
Yeah.
it's so interesting. Like when you get into it, if you're thinking about starting a business like this, do the thing that you're best at, get
Hmm.
results like that, but start to notice, like Hunter, you clearly know your audience because it's
Hmm.
like, oh yeah, here's where they get tripped up, here's what they're struggling with. And then you'll just have to backfill your program from also, I experienced that. Like,
Yeah.
oh, also like, oh, pornography addiction. Like, didn't
Right.
really think about that in relation to family, but now we got to talk about it. And so
Yep.
it's these little things that you end up adding onto the program that guys are actually going to be blessed by more so than like they almost don't even need to care what's in your main program. Because again, I experienced this as well. Once they're in that box, they're like, just tell me what to do. No
Yeah.
more decision fatigue, like I talked
Yes.
about earlier. And yeah, guys just have to buy in and they'll just do it. So that's
100%.
very cool to hear all of that. In terms of how you're getting guys, like let's just keep going a little bit through the weeds here because this is my favorite thing to talk about. Um, so you said you've been doing full time since October 23. I noticed on your Instagram, it looked like there's 3 or 4 posts that crushed it. Is that where all of your people are coming from, or are they sort of like one here and there from the other posts? Talk to me about your strategy in terms of marketing, and how you're getting guys in, because I saw you're running like one Instagram ad by the looks of it right now.
Yeah.
And otherwise you had like 3 or 4 posts that just got like insane results. So
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
is
Yeah.
that true? Is it like a barbell strategy where you get all of them at one end and like not much for the rest of
Yeah.
them, or what's that
Yeah,
look like?
it's kind of a twofold approach. I mean, I would say the backbone is definitely just running ads, so just having something that again is like I think the biggest one is like, Christian man, your wife deserves better than a dad bod. It's like very sharp, a lot of people hated that I said that, which was great because it just made for more engagement and it kind of just, it just automatically splits like the audience, right? Of like, okay, those guys are never going to get it, but these guys, they're like, yeah, dude, you're right. Like, I agree. Let's talk. And so, that's kind of been the strategy is like, that kind of stuff. It needs to have some edge. It needs to be very honest. It needs to be pretty raw. Um, and so it's been kind of some trial and error, of like, man, what do people respond to? Is it those like simple, like grabby statements, or is it like, because a lot of my passion is like, again, it's kind of bringing more of a like theological edge to what we're doing, and so, so that hits a certain segment. Those are like more the guys I'm in church with, right? So like very studied, very educated, like they know the word very, very well, but there's a disconnect between, the effort that's put forth there and the effort that's put forth in most other areas of life, right? Um, and so that kind of gets them, but then you have these other guys that, they just it's just like the wake up call kind of a thing, right? So but yeah, the backbone of it has definitely been ads, and then it's just, man, a lot of the other stuff is just more organic, and it's just kind of like nurturing, so it's just like showing a lot more depth, kind of more like who I am, what I'm after, what I'm trying to do. And so it's funny because I'll definitely get a ton of inbounds, from ads. That's mainly what I'm processing, as I'm like getting leads and stuff. But then, man, pretty often I'll just get a message and it's like, dude, I've been following you for a year and just been like following along, and I just love what you're doing. I love what you're saying, and man, I need some help now, you know. And so I think it's really cool to have both of those at the same time, because it's like, man, I'm not only capturing the attention of somebody that has no idea who I am or what I do, and that's going really well, but also the guys that have been here since like day one, they're just getting like, they're just getting closer and closer to that edge of like, dude, I need your help. Like, let's jump in and let's do it. Um, and so that's kind of the, I think for me in this season of life, like that's really what I want. Like that'll be a lot of the piece for me day in and day out, of just putting out the content that again is just building a ton of trust, like where they really know me. I don't have any problem getting on a sales call, but it's really cool to be able to jump on a call with somebody and they're like, dude, I feel like I already know everything about you. So like you're just there's just a lot of trust. They see you as, like, and they're it's funny. Like some guys are like, dude, I feel, it's like it's weird to even be talking to you. Like you feel like a slut. I'm like, dude, I'm nobody. Like seriously, I'm literally nobody. But it's funny, but that's what that content can do, and so yeah, so up until this point, Instagram ads, that's been slaying, and then just good organic content that kind of warms people up. So now moving, in the next month or two, moving more towards, YouTube podcasts, just to be able to do more like long form, like have conversations with people. Um and I think that'll really even push that even more, where it's just like that kind of thing. Cause a lot of the stuff in the past has just been like designed posts. It hasn't even been like stuff with my face or my voice. And it was great, but I noticed like people, would message and be like, "Do you guys do this?" And I'm like, "Dude, it's just me. There's no you guys. There's no team." And so realizing, I had again, good mentors being like, "Hey, you need to step into this role of like you're the spearhead here. Like you're the voice, you're the face, and people need to see that." And so the design stuff is cool. I love it. But it's like I think what people really need is like they just they need the voice, and I think that'll be really helpful just in terms of like converting but also just getting the message out a lot more for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's what I experienced as well, and it's the weirdest thing when they're like, "I can't believe I'm talking to you," and you're like, "Why?" I had a client who's like, "I stopped listening to your podcast now that I'm a client because it's unfair that I know you so well." And that's what
Mm,
that long form content can do, so I'm excited for you
yep,
to do that,
yep.
because it's like, I looked through the data and I think like 90% of my clients had been following me on my email and my podcast for like 6 plus months. And I was like, where's all the guys who just like came across me and loved me automatically? I was like, oh, it doesn't work like that when you're talking about something, at least for me, so vulnerable, in like
Hmm.
family and stuff like that. And I think we see that more and more in coaches and influencers who are positioning themselves like this. There's more people trying to do it now. And so you require the trust building even more than ever,
Hmm.
in my opinion. So yeah, man, I totally feel
Yep.
that, and that makes a lot of sense. Now, I have a bunch of other questions. Are you interested in giving us a glimpse of how the business is doing? You don't have to give specifics if you don't want. It's doing more than your ministry, so at least a
Yeah.
couple $1,000 a month, I assume. What can you say about that you're comfortable with to give guys a little bit of, I don't know, excitement or whatever if they want to go down this path? And then let's talk about a few other things after that.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, I mean, I think, for any coach, it's like the big, like, the golden egg is like 10K a month, right? It's like that's like the big, like, first thing. So I've had a lot of those, that feels pretty normal to me now. And so now I'm kind of in that phase of like, okay, so what's it going to take to get to 20? So it's just like refining those and be there like really sustainably, like to where it's just kind of like, man, I don't even, I can just run the play and that's pretty set in stone, and then from there, it's just continuing to scale, but still just one man team. So like things inherently move slow because of that. Cause I'm literally doing everything. So, um, but the cool part about that, is I'm like, I look at, 12 or $13,000. I'm like, it's not like a ton of money, but in this world, what's cool about it is it's like almost entirely profit. I'm not paying other people. I'm not paying for products. Like I'm paying for some ads, and then there's like some taxes. There's a little bit of software. But outside of that, dude, it's pretty much just straight to me, which is really cool. That's, I have a lot of friends that jump into entrepreneurship and business, and it's like, yeah, I went and got this loan for $80,000 and or 100 or 200 or I have these, and I'm just like, dude, that stresses me out. So they're playing a bigger game for sure, and I'm not saying I won't ever do that because that sounds really fun, at some point as I'm, growing some business acumen that I don't currently have. But for now it's like, man, this is a pretty cool system. So
That's awesome, dude.
that's where we're at right now, so I think we've been very, very blessed, again, just to have good counsel and not make stupid decisions. So like our baseline for month to month is not very high. Um, and we keep expenses really low. We our house, we bought our house 7 years ago, so it's like it's pretty cheap. And so there's just a lot of things like that where it's just like, man, to me it's like that freedom is like the just growing the gap between like what you're spending and what's coming in, obviously. So like the bigger we can get that, it's like, man, we have a lot to play around with and to give and to fund other things and things like that. So that's kind of where our head is at right now, is just kind of be at this really stable, shooting, within, Q3, be at, 2025 a month, pretty sustainably. So yeah.
Yeah, and it's so ridiculous how like inundated we are with numbers in this space, because
Yeah.
if you talk to any other human being and you're like, "Hey, I can spin up a, six-figure business in the next 12 months." They're like,
Yeah.
"Are you freaking kidding me?" Like,
Yeah.
that is ridiculous. Dude, I slaved for 7 years to build my pressure washing company up like that. And it's like, I posted on Instagram. It's like, "What?" And so that's why I love this. It's like, it's for me, it was a little bit scary because of what we talked
Hmm.
about already. Like, is this gonna last? But it was the same sort of trajectory on my end, where it's just like, suddenly you're like doing okay. And then you just sort of keep posting and you keep doing okay. And again, like you said, there are bigger games, but
Hmm.
for a lot of people like you and me, that, 10, 20K is like, we're probably pretty good after that. And
Yeah.
that was so, it was stressful for me when I longed for more. And it
Mm.
was like, if I had just realized how good things were at the time, instead of going like, dude, this has to be 1 million this year, I would have saved myself a lot of grief. So I'm in a space right now where I'm like, just stay there for a bit, like chill out. The
Yeah.
particular part of this podcast I think is really cool is like, it ain't all about the numbers anyway.
Hmm.
And so how do we like exist within that? But anyway, I appreciate you sharing that, man, because
For
not
sure.
everyone wants to. But when I'm looking for case studies, I'm like, just tell me how
Yeah.
much you're making. Like, I
Yeah,
don't know
dude.
anything
I
else.
mean,
Just how much, how
yeah.
long did it take you? What are you doing?
It's
So I
it's it's
appreciate
a
it.
it's a weird tension. 'Cause it's like I'm playing a small game. Like I know that, but it's at the same time, it's like I remember just a few years ago in ministry, like, dude, 10K a month sounded insane. Like that was like the craziest
Yeah.
thing I could ever imagine. And so then to be thinking like, bro, the numbers work for me to do my annual salary a month, and more. Like I'm not there, obviously, but it's just like that, like the math checks out. And so that's been really, really cool for me. And then just, I'm sure you felt this too, but I think this is where what a lot of people don't get about entrepreneurship or like owning a business, right? Is just like, just being out from under like another person is like, that is who sets your value. I mean, we're still in that, obviously in a way, right? But just this thing of like, man, you're in just a normal like W-2 job, where it's just like, dude, I hope I get a 5% raise, dude. Like that would be like crazy. That's awesome. And then you're like, dude, I can get on the phone with somebody like later today for 30 minutes and boom, 3 or 4 grand, like that's crazy. That's a crazy feeling and it gives you a lot of ownership. And so yeah, I think it kind of like it's just that tension because on one side you're like, is this real? Like, is this feels kind of crazy? Like, like I'm sure your parents and my parents, like, it's like, what are you doing? This doesn't make any sense. Um, but it's like, I mean, this is what's happening. This is where it's going, and so overall, yeah, it's just that thing of like the creator economy is massive, and it's getting even more massive, and so, I think I think about that a lot of just, because I think too you can be very somebody like coming from my background or really a lot of backgrounds where you're just kind of like, man, was the last like 10 years a waste? Not a waste, but well, like, was it like, what if I had started this 5 years ago or 10 years? But it's like, dude, everything you did, like that entire journey, like it's led you to the place where you're able to do what you're doing now, and that was, you cannot put a price on that. So, I think it's just kind of being at peace with God's sovereignty and those things. And like, man, I wouldn't have the abilities or the character or anything, if I hadn't done, been where I have been. And so, um, but yeah, it's crazy. And there's been a lot of mindset shift there, because being in ministry like that, it gives you a very specific kind of mindset, that it's not bad. But I think it can be a little bit dangerous, like jumping into business, because it kind of just puts a limit on what you think is possible or achievable in a lot of ways. So yeah.
Dude, I feel like that's probably a great podcast to have at some point. I
Yeah.
don't have any experience in that, but the number of people that I know who have, who've had
Mhm.
to unlearn certain things,
Mhm.
um, and come to peace with some things about that, is growing. So maybe I'll earmark that for another conversation. Um, oh yeah, the thing I was going to say about that though, man, and like this, why I'm really excited about spaces like this, is because number one, it happens so fast that you kind of go like, well, what's a million next year? That happened to me, and it was to my
Mhm.
detriment. And I see now that it only takes you doing what you're already doing over an extended period of time. So
Mhm.
I kept trying to add things and I kept buying courses and I kept hiring coaches. I spent like, I don't know, $30,000 on coaches
Mhm.
last year that made me almost nothing at the end of it because I should have just kept doing what I was doing.
Yeah.
So anyway, just, to encourage you and anyone else listening, like, don't change everything. Just do it for a longer period of time because you got here in like a flipping year or 2 years, whatever it's been. Like that's unreal. So anyway, my experience is just like, don't go crazy. Do what you're doing now for a longer period of time.
Mhm.
That status will grow amongst the people who follow you, and you'll be
Yep.
good.
Yep.
Last couple thoughts here. Did you think about anything else? And we can kind of do rapid fire if you want. But like,
Yeah.
was this the only business you thought of considering? Do you have any other thoughts about business that you're like, maybe one day? Because I like to give people extra thoughts too, right? If they're still looking to start a
Yeah.
business, like what else?
For sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I love consulting, like, I love coaching, so, like, anything within that kinda realm is really fun just to help people win. Um, I think one of the things the hardest part for me, honestly, is I'm such an extrovert, and so just to be, like, working alone, like, without a team, that's been the hardest part. So, like, honestly, that's the kinda stuff way more than, like, a revenue goal, like, I'm more excited about that of just, like, having people to, like, "Dude, let's meet up and get on a whiteboard." Like, that sounds so fun. Um, but, some of the other things I've thought through, it's kinda funny 'cause I was talking to one of my clients who's he does he ministry background, like, we were on staff at the same church, he's doing, like, more, like, missions, like, sending kind of things. And I was just it was funny, so, like, we're just catching up, and I was kinda venting. I was like, "Dude, it's like everything I do has to be so, like, world shifting and, like, so full of heart and passion and, and I just like, I wanna just go, like, start a roofing company or, like, an HVAC company or something like that, or, like, buy one that
Bro,
exists and
please
just
keep
make
talking. This is so
Yeah,
me.
because it's like and then there's no it's just like X's and O's, dude. It's just black and white. It's like there's not you're not trying to change somebody's life, And so, but his response was like, "Bro, that's just how you and I are built. That's how we are. We were created to be and exist, and we are, yeah, really frustrated by it a lot of times, but ultimately that is where we are the most at peace and excited." And um, so that's been swirling around, in my head, but I could totally see like, yeah, it would be really fun to like, I know there's like so much talk of like, acquisitions and like people retiring out and selling their business, just boring, boring stuff. And I love I mean, it's funny, so we were in Waco, Texas last night, and it's and you're like at the silo, like the Magnolia silos, like you're at, all these places. You've seen how like God-fearing people can change a culture and a city and enrich it and revitalize it. And that is like, dude, it's so inspiring. And I know everybody like people always make fun of me, oh yeah, like I'm going to the silos, with my girls. Let's get some wine. But it's like, dude, no, it's incredible. It's absolutely incredible how like just just people that love the Lord, that have a vision, that take risks and have the excellence and the taste to back it up and the work ethic to back it up, like what they can do. And and that's just super inspiring. So like that kind of a thing, I don't even know what that looks like, but just being a part of like, man, we planted roots in this place and it was rough. But dude, we've poured our hearts into this city and we've given people things to do and we've made the quality of life better. And, we've done things with excellence that people need and people want in this place. I love that. I love that. So I don't know. I don't know what it looks like, but 'cause I think with my business, like that's way more what I'm interested in is like building a brand. Like I don't want just like a coaching business, right? Like I want something that's just like, man, if you want like a dope t-shirt to wear to the gym, like you come to us, like because we have really cool stuff, or you need like an inspiring podcast, you come to us, or need help with the specifics, you come to us. And so they're like, there's a lot of layers. And so it's been kind of this, just like you were talking about, like kind of extending that timeline and trajectory. Like I don't have to do that all right now, but it will happen at some point when the timing is right. Um, but yeah, I mean, I'm 30, I just turned 32 like a couple weeks ago. So it's like, man, I have like a good amount of time. And so it's been more just like, man, what's like the 5 year, 10 year, 15 year, but I think, yeah, so there's definitely some thoughts of like, it'd be fun to have just a very boring business, that just has good systems and good people and, provides a service that's needed. But then also, man, just getting into some other stuff that's I guess maybe more local than, the kind of like, working with guys all over the country, which is great, but just something that kind of enriches the places, we're in day to day, I guess.
Dude, yeah, man, I couldn't be like more excited to hear you talk about this because I have not been able to stop thinking about that exact thing, which is like, why, my wife even told me, she's like, why do you make things so hard on yourself? It's like, you're trying to do business and meaning and ministry and in everything you ever do. I'm like, well,
Yep.
I can't not. And I was thinking about like this with Proclaim podcasting. It's like podcast editing agency. Who for? For Christians. And like
Hmm.
only guys that I want to like actually proclaim their content because it's actually good stuff. This would be so much easier if I just
Yep.
said, come one, come all. And yet I'm like, oh, I would feel bad doing that though. And so, yeah, man, like I've literally been having conversation with buddies of mine who are also online Instagram influencer coaches. Like, should we just like start an e-commerce brand? Should we just like go invest in a company? Like, what should we do, man? So anyway, I got to start a flipping mastermind with guys who have just been on this podcast because you just said like three things that are like at least three other guests have said. So I got
Yeah.
to connect everyone here. This is fun. Anyway, dude, I've got like at least twice as many questions. So maybe we'll do this round two if you're ever interested. Where should people find you? I've kept you long enough. Monolith movement, something or other. Tell us the exact link, please.
Yeah. Just Instagram. It's at Monolith Movement. Dude, that's it for now. So yeah,
Okay. Well, the man with the best aesthetic in the game, you have to follow him on Instagram just for that. It is beautiful, like legitimately
appreciate it.
amazing. So anyway, dude, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate all your time and
Dude,
God
thanks for
bless,
having
man.
me. Yeah, man.
Peace.